What is it that makes the British seaside sinister? Why does it seem to attract so many killers? Is it the fact that the tide washes away their sins? Is it the fact that it's the end of the line? There's nothing overly frightening about a big wheel or a carousel. But what is undeniable is that the British seaside attracts and has always attracted death and murder. Hello, I'm Geoffrey Wansell. I write about crime, true crime. And in this new series, I want you to join me on a journey to the cliff's edge, where land meets the sea and where life meets death. For make no mistake, there is something sinister about our British seaside towns. On the surface, they're all funfairs, candy floss and breezy promenades. But by digging a little deeper in the sand, we uncover an underworld of misfits and misfeasance, murder and mayhem. And reveal the dark lives of the most deadly coastal killers to ever stalk our shores. In today's episode, we come face to face with a man who is perhaps the quintessential British coastal killer, a man whose love of the ocean wave was only bettered by his desire to murder his wife. Southport in Lancashire has remarkable beach. It's famous for the training of Red Rum, who won the Grand National 3 times, galloped along the sands by the trainer Ginger McCain. It is the acceptable face, some would say, of Liverpool, the place where people born in Liverpool aspire to. It has a sailing club, a very respectable thing to have, and one member of the sailing club, the Commodore no less, was called Paul Longworth. Paul Longworth, this handsome 37-year-old man, certainly a figure in Southport, Commodore of the Yacht Club, a man to be looked up to. And yet, there was also something about him which was deeply sinister.
Paul Longworth was something of a seafarer. He was the Commodore of local yacht club. He was someone who liked to see himself in a role in society and really pushed his more domestic life into the background.
He and his wife Tina used the club as their social life. They were very prominent members within Southport Sailing Club. But equally there was quite a lot of gossip going on in that club about their turbulent marriage.
Paul Longworth put up this facade that he'd been happily married for a number of years. His wife doted on him. He had 2 beautiful children. I mean, he was the life and soul of the party. She adored him. She'd worked with him through their married life, building him up, watching him front this false being that he was. And she was actually suffering inside throughout this period. She had to take a step back. If he flirted at a party or at a social do, she would sit back in the background, not interfering, because this is the way he would control her. And this woman would have suffered a great deal emotionally, mentally, and I suspect physically from time to time, because behind closed doors, when the curtains are drawn, what went on in that house was probably quite horrible.
Paul and Tina Longworth, this apparently happy couple, had 2 children who thought that their parents couldn't be better. But the reality was quite different.
Paul Longworth was something of a ruthless character. He was somebody who was possessive, jealous, and someone who showed really, really strong traits of psychopathy in his kind of abilities to actually carry out callous acts under callous circumstances. And not only that, to act out complete innocence so convincingly.
Paul Longworth was actually a respectable guy, very well integrated into society. But his story shows how the classic hero narrative, which I think underpins his life, can sometimes go wrong. Sometimes the ego, the strong ego that drives a hero narrative, essentially grows out of control. And then all that matters, everything that matters is about building that ego and protecting that ego.
Longworth's eccentricities were exaggerated by a violent streak, one that would find its full expression behind closed doors.
Paul Longworth's marriage looked quite normal from the outside. 2 children, seemed to be happily married, but behind closed doors it was violent. It was an abusive relationship. There was venom on both sides. His wife took kind of retaliation by taking on a lover, and he was incensed at this and incensed at the idea that his image could be tainted by it.
He comes across as a possessive man, and the fact that he'd effectively driven her into the arms of someone else, I think basically the relationship had started with between Tina and her new lover was basically just 2 people comforting each other, and it had blossomed from that. But yes, I mean, he's such a possessive character, Paul Longworth, that this would have, I think, really set him off.
Tina had become sick of her egotistical, vainglorious husband, who gloried in being Commodore of the local sailing club, who thought himself more than a cut above most people. One can speculate that perhaps he wasn't satisfying his wife particularly, because there is no doubt whatever that she launched into an affair with a local firefighter. Longworth discovered the affair and was not best pleased. Indeed, it was that discovery that incited him to commit what he hoped would be a perfect murder, to rid himself of this troublesome, unfaithful wife. Paul Longworth, on the surface, was not a particularly exciting man, although he was Commodore of the Southport Sailing Club. Very proud of himself, pretty vain, and also angry with his wife. Tina and he had had a troubled relationship, but now he was determined that he was going to take his revenge upon her.
Longworth's discovery that Tina was conducting a passionate affair saw him become increasingly volatile and violent towards his wife.
Longworth's marriage plummeted to great depths of depravity. He was abusive in a very violent way. He would hit his wife. He was somebody who basically took things in life and wanted to give very little in return.
Tina had actually told friends that her husband had raped her. Clearly the relationship had broken down. She wanted to move on, and clearly Paul Longworth was very angry and very annoyed about what was going on, and clearly wanted to be in control and be possessive.
On his 37th birthday, Longworth decided, I think, that he would rid himself of this awful woman. In the morning, he'd ripped up in front of her the birthday card she'd given him. They'd had a fantastic argument. He'd gone to work in the opticians, gone to the sailing club to start the celebrations of his 37th birthday. He decides to leave the sailing club, go back to the house and kill her. He strangles her with a sailing rope. If you strangle someone, there are particular hemorrhages in your eyes to prove you've been strangled. So he gets round that by suspending his wife, Tina, over the banisters with the sailing rope around her neck. And so it looks as though, by hanging herself, she has, of course, caused particular hemorrhaging. It is an extremely clever, but bear in mind, he did work in an opticians, an extremely clever way of doing it. And Longworth was nothing if not aware of what might be thought of. He then, absolutely without a moment's hesitation or remorse, he leaves his wife hanging over the banisters in their house, the children asleep upstairs. I find it almost extraordinary. How can you imagine that? Leaves the children upstairs and goes back to the sailing club to continue at the party for his 37th birthday to give himself the perfect alibi.
What makes this crime particularly unpleasant and horrific is that in creating an alibi, he risked, for his selfishness, he risked the fact that his children could have got out of their bed, two very young children getting out of their bed and seeing their mother dead, hanging from the banisters, which would have traumatized them for life. Fortunately, they slept through it. But he did that, taking that risk, knowing that they could have woken up.
Key illustration of the way that Paul Longworth's ego has gone out of control is the way that he is oblivious to the possibility that his little children may discover the body of their mother. This just shows me that other people, even his own children, have ceased to register for Paul Longworth if his ego is damaged.
With the mother of his children now dead and hanging from the banister at home, Longworth makes an extraordinarily bold move. He returns to his birthday party and continues enjoying the celebrations.
The amount of cold-blooded calculation that would go into actually returning to a party at a yacht club and partying while you know that you've just left your wife attached to the banisters, dead, it's just mind-boggling.
He went to his birthday party, and it was a fabulous birthday party, and not one person there suspected that he'd done anything wrong. And this is one of the most dangerous things about these sociopaths and psychopaths. They can kill, they can commit the most awful crime because they're not like you and me. And then they can go out and they switch off and forget it. And that's very difficult for the viewer to understand that. These people have not got a conscience where there should be caring, love and devotion. There is a black hole.
With the birthday party at a close, Longworth returns home.
When he gets back, gosh, he calls the police. Oh, my wife, oh, there's been some dreadful... He calls a neighbour, a nurse, who comes round and says, oh my goodness, don't worry, she's feeling for a pulse. And this incredibly calculated man is sitting on the stairs cradling the body of the woman he's earlier strangled, saying, oh, you'll be all right, and stroking her hair. It is almost inconceivable how dreadful that was. I mean, it is so ugly and so unappetizing that it takes your breath away. But believe me, Longworth had that all in his grasp. He knew precisely what he wanted to do, and he knew precisely how to get away with it. So it is no surprise that when the police arrive and the neighbour says, Paul was so upset when he found the body, the police immediately think it's suicide.
News of Tina's death sent a shockwave through the neighbourhood.
Such a nice young couple, they looked nice when they come to see the nan with the children, you know, and it's just unbelievable.
When Longworth comes home and apparently discovers his wife hanging from the balcony, he feigns the idea that he's surprised. He rings 999. He goes round to the neighbours and causes a fuss. He really drew attention to this. He was, if you like, almost proud of his crime. This is a man with complete control over his outward emotions, a psychopath.
He knows he must now put in an actorly performance, that of the stunned and grieving husband, if he is to convince the authorities that his wife's death is a suicide and not a murder.
Handsome, debonair, a man about town, commodore of the local sailing club, Paul Longworth presented to the world the perfect image of a respectable man. But, and it is a large but, beneath the surface, he was about to be revealed for what he truly was: vengeful, jealous, and worse, murderous.
For me, Longworth's killing of his wife is one of the nastiest examples of murder that I've ever come across.
Paul Longworth believed that he had committed the perfect murder. He had strangled his wife with a sailing rope and dangled her over the balcony. He'd also spread pictures of her children around her, as if to convince the police that she had, of course, taken her own life. He then returned to his 37th birthday party at the Southport Sailing Club to give himself a nice, clear alibi. This vainglorious, disingenuous, dreadful man then goes home and pretends to discover his wife's, quotes, suicide. Even more horrifying, he sustains the illusion by cradling her head in his arms and stroking her head so that the police see him do it, even though earlier that same evening he had strangled her without any compunction whatever. It was the act of a man who was nothing if not overconfident.
He came across very much as an arrogant man. He thought he was cleverer than the police. He thought that he was going to get away with it. And he convinced Tina's family that he was innocent and that it was a tragic mistake. And he kept that up for a very long period of time.
When Longworth managed to craft his murder into what looked like a suicide, he thought he had committed the perfect crime. He thought he was going to walk away from murder. He saw no reason for it to be doubted. It was partly cemented by the fact that he had left 2 children with their mother hanging from the balcony. Would any normal person do that? No. Far easier to believe the suicide story. In his mind, he thought it was perfect.
Initially, the police were convinced by Paul Longworth's pretense and started to believe that it was indeed suicide. But there was a compelling argument that it might not have been, which was, of course, there was no suicide note. And it was that began to tempt them to consider that Longworth wasn't quite such an innocent bystander as he liked to appear.
His planning of it extended to adding a few devious finishing touches to the faked suicide scene.
When the police arrived at this catastrophic scene of suicide, they discovered, of course, that Longworth had managed to arrange some photographs of the children below his wife's body. They also would be curious about a suicide note because they always look for a suicide note. This confirms the idea or the intent of suicide, and Longworth couldn't synthesize this. His next best thing was to arrange photos of the kids. This was not the only chink in Longworth's armour. He was someone who was very confident that he could carry this off. He even suggested to the police that, she was depressed and she had a phobia about cancer and this may have precipitated this. That's protesting a little bit too much, really. You let them discover that. You don't go and throw it in their face. Police, generally speaking, were a little bit suspicious from the word go. When they found 30-odd marks on her body, they were very suspicious and decided that the post-mortem could decide whether this was really suicide.
There must have been some doubt in the mind of the police, because otherwise they would have had the post-mortem done by the local pathologist. But they must have consulted the coroner, who must have decided that it should be treated as a Home Office case. I got the call on the morning that the body had been found. And the body had been taken to the hospital, and the police rang me and said that although it appeared to be a hanging, then they were just a bit concerned they'd like me to go and have a look at it and do the post-mortem rather than it being done by the local pathologist. So I went, and the puzzling thing about it when I saw the body was the fact that there wasn't just a hanging mark on the neck, there was a horizontal mark as well. This made me begin to become suspicious as to whether it was indeed a straightforward hanging. there were 2 marks on the neck, the fact that there were pinpoint hemorrhages between the 2 marks, the fact that there were bruises and abrasions on the neck, the fact that there were bruises on the arms and on the legs. All these things didn't seem to add up to a straightforward hanging. The police made enquiries about other possible causes of the marks on the legs and discovered that she had intercourse with somebody else during the course of that day. But after interviewing him and then talking to me about it, I was prepared to make a statement to the effect that I didn't think that they'd been caused during that kind of activity.
And this made the police start to question whether A, it was the perfect marriage that he had tried to suggest it was, and the fact that the police had talked to other family members and had talked to her friends, and there was a clear growing feeling that something was wrong. Added to which he was very insensitive to her and her memory. And there was reported suggesting that he'd made sexual advances to some of her friends quite soon after her death. So we had a situation where the man wasn't behaving the way that you would anticipate somebody who had been bereaved by the tragic death of his young wife. He behaved in a way that indicated that he didn't care.
When I went to the scene later that morning, Paul Longworth was there, and he appeared to be quite relaxed and said, should he stay in the lobby or should he go into a room away from there, and they asked him to leave. I was told that the body was hanging by a rope from the banisters. And eventually when we went to look at the scene, then I could see the situation that where the rope had been hanging. One of the things that in fact weighed against it being a straightforward hanging was that there were no marks on the banister, and if in fact she had been hanging there in a suicidal attempt, then there might well have been some marks on the banister.
The police, once they start to look into the marriage, they start to see the cracks that were there in Paul Longworth's story. They look at Tina's diary and some letters that she'd written to her grandfather, and there's no trace of her being depressed. All the things that he's been saying is not obvious in anything that she's been writing. It all starts to look a bit suspicious.
Of course, going to Southport Sailing Club, where there'd been lots of witnesses who knew. In fact, Tina had alleged that he had raped her in their marriage, and also alleged that he had hit her. So there was lots of talk in the sailing club that their marriage was on the rocks, and so lots of witness statements would have completely changed the picture and said this is a domestic violence incident that is turned into murder straight away.
Investigators now have the first of many suspicions that Tina Longworth's suicide might not be all that it seems. They began to look closer for clues at the crime scene that would suggest foul play was afoot.
Suicide itself is quite difficult to stage. Somebody trying to commit suicide often will take tablets or do something else. Hanging yourself from the stairs is difficult. To hang yourself from halfway down the stairs is near impossible. You don't have enough height to get the full effect of breaking your neck. The other thing he did was he actually put 2 photographs of her children, Tina's children, either side of her, as to show that she died with them. I did an experiment with some of my students at the time, and I got them to hold 2 photographs and to jump. And every female held them next to their chest, and as they jumped, they fell. We know that normally if you drop something down the stairs, it's going to fall to the bottom of the stairs. You don't find things drop and stay either side perfectly next to the body. So that again gave an indication it was staged. What was interesting was he had damage to his hand and clearly had rope burns, which he tried to persuade the police was caused when he lifted her up. When he found her, he lifted up her body and he burnt his hands on the rope. This is highly unlikely. The injuries were such that his hand would have been in contact with the rope for a much longer period of time than just lifting up her body.
Something else puzzled investigators. Why would a woman who loved her children so dearly kill herself?
She was absolutely devoted to her children. She actually kept a record of the increased size in her stomach every week as she was pregnant. She kept children's invitation to birthday parties. She had so much information about the children. It was clear that she would not have killed herself and left her two children that she was devoted to. Also, she would not have left a body where the children could have stumbled across it in the morning. So quite clearly there were lots of indications that this wasn't a clear-cut suicide. There was no suicide note. There was no indication of any mental health problems or anything that indicated that she was likely to take her life.
Everything about Paul Longworth was about pretense. He pretended to have a perfect marriage, although in fact it was anything but. At one point he admitted to a friend that he hit his wife. At another moment she told another friend that he raped her. In despair at what was happening in her supposedly perfect marriage, Tina Longworth embarked on an affair with a local fireman called Gary Silcock. He was to say later, "She met me for the same reason that I met her. Things were not right at home." He went on to say, even more poignantly perhaps, she didn't want to leave Paul. She didn't want to hurt him. Hurt him? A man who's already raped you, has hit you on a number of occasions, and she didn't want to hurt him? This is a genuinely kind, loving wife who is fallen into the hands of a monster. And Silcock concluded by saying, most significantly of all, she couldn't leave her children. In the end, Paul Longworth took her away from her children forever. Paul Longworth's obscene construct that his wife committed suicide rapidly began to evaporate. It became obvious to the police once they'd looked at her diary, and particularly at a letter that she'd written to her grandfather, that she had no wish whatever to commit suicide. They'd also discovered that she'd received treatment for a phobia about cancer. It was not the actions of a woman who was determined to end her life.
All the evidence was by now stacking up against Longworth, and the police decided to arrest him for the murder of his wife, Tina.
Paul Longworth, who's 38 and an ophthalmic optician, is accused of strangling his 29-year-old wife Tina in January of last year. The prosecution's alleged that to make it look like suicide, he then strung her up from the banisters of the staircase at their home in the resort. Today, Paul Longworth took the stand to give more than an hour's worth of evidence.
Although all the evidence pointed to the fact that Longworth had murdered his wife, he believed he had one last lifeline that would be enough to win over a jury.
To keep up this act seamlessly when he was being dragged through court and her own parents, his wife's own parents believed him to the end. This takes psychopathic skills. This is the underlying raison d'etre, if you like. It's the reason that set Paul Longworth apart from the rest of humanity.
Paul Longworth also spoke of how he tried 3 times to lift his wife up from the stairs and then cut the rope from around her neck. He also expressed his sense of loss and confusion and declared his anger at what, he said, his wife had done. Fighting back tears, Paul Longworth spoke of how the following morning he sat both children down on their beds and broke the news. Mummy got bad in the night. The doctor couldn't help, he told them. Mummy's gone to heaven.
Longworth was putting on a convincing performance in the dock, and his cause was being strengthened by conflicting pathology reports that could not agree on whether the cause of death was murder or suicide.
They asked Dr. Burns, the homeless pathologist for Merseyside at that time, to come and examine the body with me. And he, in fact, didn't agree with me. He felt that it was more likely to be just a hanging. And he gave evidence for the defence in the trial.
The differing of opinion on the cause of death led to 2 separate autopsies being performed by 2 teams of doctors, one acting for the defence, the other for the prosecution.
The normal procedure, if there's a difference of opinion between the pathologist that's done the post-mortem for the prosecution and that's the person that's done the post-mortem for the defence, then other pathologists are often called in for an opinion. And Dr. Clark from Sheffield gave an opinion which agreed with Dr. Burns, and Dr. West from London gave an opinion which was against the defendant, rather more forcibly than the evidence that I'd given against the defendant. I think that Dr. West's evidence played an important part in the decision by the jury to find him guilty.
Longworth stood motionless in the dock as the jury of 6 women and 4 men took just under 4 hours to return its unanimous verdict. At that point, Longworth turned to the jurors and mouthed, "No, you're wrong." The judge, Mr. Justice Hidden, told him he'd murdered his wife Tina in a brutal act. He added, "You snuffed out the life of your wife entirely for your own selfish reasons, without any regard for those 2 children who were hers and yours." The judge told Longworth there's only one sentence for the crime of murder, and that is life imprisonment.
When he was found guilty, his world collapsed. This homicidal Del boy is stripped of his gold, his fancy suits, his boating friends, his drinking parties. He is now reduced to a prison number, a nobody within the correctional system.
The senior investigating officer on the case described Paul Longworth's actions in staging his wife's suicide as, and I quote, "less a crime of passion than of temper." He also went on to say, and again I quote, that Longworth was a ruthless and possessive man.
Things that comes across about Paul Longworth was he was very much into image management, as we would call it today. He wanted to create the image of being the commodore of the local sailing club, a man of some means, a man of some status. Having his wife run off with a fireman would have absolutely shattered that image, and that's not an image he would want. Had he been successful, he could have then had even more sympathy towards him. Poor man, his wife committed suicide.
Longworth himself offered little meaningful insight into why he killed his wife, but his reason for murder may have been one of the oldest in the world: jealousy.
I think it's very likely that he did it in a fit of rage, which is what he admitted to ultimately. and it was all done because he was angry and they'd fallen out, and he got the rope and put it round her neck.
Paul Longworth is an unusual criminal. He was an eminently respectable, very well socially integrated individual, which I think is why this case is so hard to process. But he's a classic example of how the hero narrative can go wrong and lead to violent criminality. The classic hero narrative sometimes goes wrong when the ego that is needed to drive a healthy hero narrative grows out of control. And then nothing else matters but protecting that ego, the significance of the individual, their role, their importance, and above all, their pride is paramount in everything. And these people become oblivious. It's not just that they don't care about other people, it's that other people don't actually register as significant within their world. That's how Paul Longworth could do this to his wife. That's how Paul Longworth could leave the body where his little children could potentially have come across it.
Mercifully, Tina's children never woke from their sleep on the day that she was murdered. But to this day, Longworth refuses to express any remorse towards them for taking their mother away.
In the United States, for somebody that had committed the offences that Longworth had done, he would have served the rest of his natural life in prison. But Longworth got a life sentence, and he's only spent a relatively short time in prison, and it becomes parole time. And all of a sudden, this manipulating sociopath twigs on. If I confess a little bit, if I show some false remorse, if I use my glib charm that I've used all these years, I can reinvent myself, and I will be able to calm the parole board, calm the judiciary, calm the law completely, and I will walk out of prison. And the problem with this man is, once he's outside, he will use his charms again.
To stage your wife's suicide and hide behind the mask of a grieving husband is an act of such desperate criminality that there is no possible excuse for it. Paul Longworth does not deserve one moment of our sympathy or forgiveness. I hate to say it, but it seems to me that Paul Longworth was in the end a sailor with a slipped knot who used a slip knot to kill his wife. In all this series of coastal killers, there is no one more callous, calculated, or premeditated than Paul Longworth, a man of such vanity he thought he could achieve whatever he wanted. This peacock of a man destroyed his wife, destroyed his family for nothing more than his own vanity. Join me, Geoffrey Wansell, next time for more Murders by the Sea.